Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys coming to join us this morning, and it is great to be back in Springfield. I did spend a lot of my time here. I have a lot of memories from this area. Teaching was such a valuable time in my life, and so it's great to come back and share sort of what I've learned, where I am now from those experiences. When I was at Missouri State, let me back up for a second. When I went into education, like probably every other teacher, I realized that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to impact students. That's what every teacher wants to do. You want to change lives, right? So I went into education, and I was trying to do that in the classroom. But as I was working on my master's degree, I realized that many of the problems that I faced in my classroom were systemic problems. They couldn't be solved in one single classroom. There were problems with the whole system, the whole structure of how we provide public education. And so that's what prompted me to leave the classroom and to go and to pursue my Ph.D. at the University of Arkansas. And that's what led me to the Show Me Institute, because now I get to advocate for greater reforms that I think will help improve all of education, not just my one classroom, but every classroom in the state. So if you will, I want to toss out a little hypothetical. I want you to think about this for just a moment. Imagine in one city, two separate schools that are serving the same types of students, sort of like Representative Burlison mentioned. Students coming from the same area, but in one school, you have half the students not graduating on time, and the students that do graduate, the average ACT score is just 15. Now, that is so low that you can't get into most state schools with a 15 on your ACT. Now, just down the road in the same city, you have another school. And at that other school, about 96% of the students are graduating from college, or not graduating from college, graduating from high school, and about 70% or a little bit higher are going on to college. Now, which of those two schools best serves the public? Which of those schools advances the idea of public education? Well, I kind of lied to you for a moment, and I said those are hypothetical schools. Those are real schools. The real schools in St. Louis, they're just down the road from each other, just a little bit down the road from my office. One of those schools actually happens to be a district-run private high school, and the other school happens to be a private school. It's called De La Salle Middle School at St. Matthews. That's the school that sends more students to high school, then on to college, than the district public school. Now, if you're like me, you would say that school is advancing the idea of public education. That school is educating students. It's putting them on a path to a better opportunity, to a better life. It's putting them where we want students to be, as productive members of our society. Now, just a little while ago, I was able to talk with and interview a student who graduated from De La Salle. His name is Corey Stewart Glaze. Corey grew up in one of the historic black neighborhoods of St. Louis. Arthur Ashe used to live there. One of the first female African Americans who went on to become a millionaire lived in this neighborhood. But now that neighborhood is dilapidated. Most of the houses are broken down, many of the houses. Most of the middle class have moved out of the area, and the schools are really struggling in that area. Corey realized that if he would have gone to the local public high school, he says, I probably would have got in with the wrong crowd. I might be in jail or dead today. And he says that because that's where a lot of his friends turned out. But his path was different because his parents and his grandparents encouraged him to go to De La Salle Middle School, a brand new school with only about 20 students that was meeting above a barbecue joint called Big Mo's. So Corey takes a step of faith, really, in going to this private school. And that school changed his life. They ended up, from there, he earned a scholarship to a private high school, a well-regarded school in St. Louis. And then he went on to Westminster in Fulton, Missouri. And you know Westminster is where Winston Churchill gave his famous Iron Curtain speech. And now Corey is an adult with a college degree. He's participating in our society. He has a great job. He also works at De La Salle, helping to recruit students. Now that school prepared him for life. And that brings me to the heart of our question, the heart of the topic today. What is public education? I was on the radio here in Springfield just yesterday talking about this idea, and the host asked me, whenever I go up to vote for a tax increase, if I vote no, or I take a stance against the tax increase for the local schools, people say I'm against public education. And we hear that all the time. If you don't support the local public schools, you're against public education. But that's not really what public education is. I mean, I think that if we tried to write up on a whiteboard somewhere what is public education, most of us would probably come up with the same general idea. When we think of public education as what you have, and what you have is a district, typically, with an elected board that is supposed to serve all students that come to the school, and we think that is public education. And the reality is that's a system to deliver public education. And it's a description of a system that doesn't even fit all of our public schools in Missouri. And we have schools in Missouri that are public schools that don't have elected boards. St. Louis, for instance, has a special advisory board that's been appointed. The special school district of St. Louis County has an unelected board. So we have these schools that are public schools that don't have elected boards, but yet they still serve students. They still provide for a public education to students. We have some schools in Missouri that don't accept all students. When we think that public schools are schools that serve everyone, right? We have magnet schools. You guys just had a magnet school open here recently in Nixa, but it's still open to everyone. In St. Louis and Kansas City, there are magnet schools that are designed to only take a certain type of students. They'll have a set theme or a set curriculum, and they'll oftentimes have admissions tests. You don't score high enough, I'm sorry, you can't get in. If it's an art school, and there are some of those, if you don't perform well enough, I'm sorry, you can't get in. But although it's a magnet school and it has a selective admission process, and sometimes based on race, they'll allow more white students in because they want to help integration, it's still a public school. It still serves the public's interest of educating kids. In Missouri, we also have charter schools. Charter schools are publicly financed schools. We now have them in St. Louis and Kansas City, and they can open up in any place where we have unaccredited school districts. Charter schools are financed through your local property taxes, through the state general revenue, but they're governed independently, not by an elected board, and they don't always have to accept students from a specific small catchment area, like you think about with your traditional public schools. So when we think about our traditional definition of public education, it doesn't fit what we currently have. And it doesn't fit because public education isn't a system. Public education is an idea. This brings me to Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman, as was mentioned, he was a famous economist, a very noted free market economist, and he spoke on a number of different issues. He spoke about taxes and free enterprise, but he spoke a lot about education. I'm going to provide a quote to you right now from Milton Friedman. It says, "Government has appropriately financed general education for citizenship, but in the process, it has been led also to administer most of the schools that provide such education. Yet the administration of schools is neither required by the financing of education nor justifiable in its own right in a predominantly free market society." We live in mostly a free market society. We value independent choice. You like being able to choose which restaurant you go to, which grocery store you shop at. You have lots of different choices in every area. And Milton Friedman was saying that just because we agree that we need to educate people, we need to educate our citizens, and we agree that we should finance that education, that doesn't mean that the government has to operate that system. It doesn't mean that the government necessarily has to provide every school for the students. That public education can be served in a whole bunch of different ways, including charter schools and private schools. Now, as you know, as Representative Burlison said, Friedman wasn't the first person to come up with this idea, and he's not been the last to say this. He wrote this in 1955, but people have been making this argument ever since. In 2000, former Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction, Lisa Graham Keegan, said, "If we want to save the public schools, we mustn't confuse the ideal of public education, that every child has the right to a good K-12 education at public expense, with any particular system, including the one we've got." You see, the one we've got, the system we have, is just that. It is a system. It is not public education. It's one method. It's one means of delivering public education. Paul Hill of the Brookings Institution wrote basically the same idea. Public education is a goal, ensuring that every American knows enough and has all the required skills to take a full part in our country's social, economic, and political life. Public education is not a fixed institution, but a standard against which institutions are measured. Thus, a school does not accomplish the goal of public education just because it is provided by the government. If you think back to that school that I mentioned at the beginning, if our goal is to educate students, that school where half the students are dropping out and not even graduating from high school, where the graduates only have a 15 on the ACT, that school is not doing a very good job of providing a quality education. And I don't doubt that they deal with a very challenging population. As the representative said, there's absolutely a role for parents in their kids' lives. And I don't doubt that many of the parents there aren't providing the same type of help that they might be providing here in Springfield or Nixa or Ozark or other places in the area. But it doesn't negate the fact that schools make a difference. Schools can impact students' lives. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't have schools, right? But we believe that schools can make a difference, and the research shows that. There was actually a study done by some economists that linked students and their test scores and their teachers over time to how well the students do in the workforce as adults. And this study found that if you have a highly effective teacher, that you're less likely to get pregnant as a teen, more likely to graduate, more likely to go to college, more likely to have a higher income. The President Obama, cited this in his State of the Union address. Now, we know that schools can make a difference. So yes, this is a challenging situation with a challenging bunch of kids, but the schools can absolutely make an impact. Now, when I talk about school choice, especially in Southwest Missouri, people say, well, you're talking about city problems and a solution to city problems. But that's not what I'm talking about. Yes, we have problems in St. Louis, and yes, we have problems in Kansas City. And I think school choice would work there and would help them there. But school choice isn't just about saving cities. School choice would also benefit families right here in Springfield. Now, just earlier this year, I wrote about a family that lived in Springfield. This appeared in the Springfield News Leader. Randy and Monique Georges. I met them whenever I was in college at Missouri Southern. Randy Georges moved from the British Virgin Islands to Missouri to get a good education. He met a girl from Springfield, settled in Springfield, and now he might have to move across town just so his kids can get a good education, because Randy and his wife bought a house in an area where they're zoned for one of the lower performing schools in Springfield. A school in Springfield where only a third of the students are performing at grade level on the English Language Arts exam. They do not like their school. They're not satisfied, and they're not alone. There are plenty of parents in Springfield or Republic or Nixa or anywhere that don't feel like they're being served at their local school. So if they decide that they don't want their kids to go there, what can they do? I mean, Springfield has an intra-district transfer program. So if you're at one school and you want to go to another school in the district, you can transfer, and that's great. I commend them for that. But there are a limited number of spaces. And they applied for the transfer, but they didn't get it. They couldn't really afford a private school tuition, so what do? Right now, they're in a school where they're not happy, where they don't feel like they're being served. Well, let's say they do scrape together the money, and they leave, and they go to a private school. Do they care less about public education? I don't think so. I think they actually just care about quality education. They want what's best for their kids. I faced a very similar situation. When I was in Northwest Arkansas, my wife was a teacher in the district. I was working my Ph.D. We didn't like how our kids were being taught. We thought that they were doing a very poor job of teaching them math. We felt like they were being confused more than they were being taught. And so I went to the school district. I met with the principal, met with the assistant principal, I met with a teacher. I observed in a first grade classroom, a second grade classroom, a third grade classroom. I asked them to change, but they didn't. They had a system that they thought was right, that they were doing what they thought was in the best interest of kids, which I didn't agree with. And this was just about math instruction. They weren't serving me or my kids. Now, I could have appealed this to the board, to the democratically elected board, who is supposed to serve my interest, but I really don't think that they would have changed anything. They had a whole system in place that governed a whole bunch of schools, and it's not likely that they would have changed it on my account. So what were my options? Well, luckily, the school district that my wife taught in paid her enough for us to leave that school district. And we pulled our kids out mid-year and put them into a private school. Do we care less about public education because we did that? No. We just wanted a good education that met our needs for our kids. So public education is not about a system. It's about providing a quality education to all kids. Now, the public schools in this area do a pretty good job. Most parents are satisfied, but not all are. Expanding school choice would give, even to include private schools, would give families more options. When we think about public education, if we think about redefining public education to have this more appropriate, in my mind, definition that public education is an idea, then we start thinking about education not as what's in the best interest of teachers or what's in the best interest of districts, but we think about public education as what's in the best interest of kids. So you might rightly ask, well, why do you think that school choice is what's in the best interest of kids? Well, there's a lot of literature that suggests so. There have been 12 random assignment studies. Now, this is the gold standard in social science research. Basically what this is these were in voucher programs. We had students that wanted to use a voucher at a private school. You had more students than the number of spots available, so you had a lottery. Half got in, half didn't, and you check how those students were performing at the beginning and at the end. This is an experiment. And what they found was, in 11 of those 12, students who had used the voucher and attended the private school benefited. The one study found no effect. So you had expanded liberty, expanded choice, but you didn't see any academic gains. In the other 11, you saw significant academic gains for all or a portion of the students. Well, you might say, as they're saying in St. Louis right now, that, well, if you let students leave the school, you have students left behind. Well, in those really failing schools, we've already left students behind. Those schools have been struggling and failing for years. But if you allow students to leave, you might say, well, those students left behind, they're going to be worse off. Well, there have been 23 studies that have looked at the competition effects of schools. Of those, 22 have shown that the local schools improve when they face competition. If you've paid attention at all to the school transfer stuff going on in St. Louis, you know that we have some unaccredited districts. And the students are going to be allowed to transfer out to some accredited districts. What I'm seeing from those two unaccredited districts, Normandy and Riverview Gardens, is they're changing. They're saying, we don't want to lose students. We're going to do everything we can to provide a good education here so the students will stay. That's what competition does. It encourages schools to improve, to innovate, to change things. It gives them the impetus to do so. So the academic literature is quite clear. The students who use scholarships to attend private schools typically benefit. The students left behind are no worse off, and in many cases are better off because the competition, because possibly they have a school that's more focused on their needs. Now, this is not a city problem. This is not a rural problem. This is expanding and liberating the idea of what is public education. Now, I think that it's time that we redefine public education. It shouldn't mean that we assign students to a school regardless of quality, but that we provide students with a quality of education regardless of the type of school. Now, I hope that we can expand our idea or redefine what we conceive of as public education. I think that all students will benefit. I think that Missouri would benefit. I think that Springfield would benefit. Now, this will not be the end of public schools, the district-run schools. But what it will do is it will give all students more options and more access to a school that's going to meet their needs. Now, I'm happy to take any of your questions, and I welcome your comments and questions right now.